On one of the tabs, I found vibe control, exceptions. Next to my name, does not match the aesthetic. Too introverted. Probably not photogenic, and my brother Trevor handed me a paper plate in the parking lot behind the reception tent. The sun hadn't even gone down yet, and already my clothes clung to my back with sweat. I stood there, next to a folding table holding a half-empty tub of coleslaw, blinking at him like he'd suddenly started speaking a different language. "We all agreed," he said, not even looking me in the eyes. "You're not in the wedding party." His tone was casual, like he was doing me a favor by saying it out loud. Then his fiance's dad, Derek, a retired dentist from Tampa I'd met once at a barbecue, chuckled and added, "Real family eats under roofs, not by dumpsters." They both laughed, the kind of forced laughter that means they were testing if you'd take offense. I didn't laugh. I didn't move. I just stared at the paper plate, flimsy and trembling in my hand like it already knew it didn't belong here. Behind me, the tent glowed warm and golden, strung with lights, humming with soft jazz and louder conversations. I could hear the laughter spilling through the vinyl flaps, smell something rich and buttery coming off the catering trays. People clinked glasses. Someone popped open a bottle of sparkling wine. Somewhere in there, my parents were sipping drinks with Jenna's family like none of this was strange. I hadn't even been assigned a seat inside. I checked the list on the display board. My name wasn't at the cousins table, not at the extended families section, not even in the outer circle. I wasn't in the tent. I wasn't part of the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't part of anything. But I was definitely part of the budget. 6 months ago, Trevor had called and said they were in a pinch with the catering deposit. Said it would be temporary. Said he'd pay me back after their honeymoon. I transferred $2,300 to him that same night. 2 weeks later, our mom called me sounding sheepish and overly rehearsed, like she'd practiced the line in the mirror. She said Dad needed a new suit because his old one didn't fit anymore, and she didn't want him to feel self-conscious during the ceremony. Armani, of all things. But we'd never asked, she said. I told her it was fine, even though it wasn't. That was another $900 gone. The month after that, I got a message from Jenna, friendly but hollow, asking if I'd consider helping pay for the drone footage since the photographer's package didn't cover aerial shots. Her exact words were, "We'd be forever grateful." That one was $1,500. "No, how are you?" "No, thank you." Just a Venmo request and 3 heart emojis. I paid it without a reply because that's what I always did. That was who I was in this family, the reliable one, the fixer, the silent wallet hiding in plain sight. It never occurred to me I wouldn't even get a place at the table. But then a week before the wedding, I called Trevor just to ask what time I should be at the rehearsal dinner. His laugh came through the phone like static. "You're not coming to that," he said. "It's mostly the bridal party and, well, you know, immediate family." I paused. "I am immediate family." Silence. Then he said, "Don't take it personally. It's just a logistical thing." That call stayed with me longer than it should have. It wasn't just the exclusion. It was the casual cruelty in the way he said it. Like I was a plus one he hadn't meant to invite. I went back through my payment history that night. 5 transactions over 5 months. Catering, suit, drone, even a custom neon sign they'd ordered from Portugal. Altogether, I had sent over $4,700, every one labeled with some vague description like backup gift or vendor support. Then I remembered something, a budgeting sheet Jenna had shared with me early on, asking for help organizing vendors. I dug it out of my inbox. Still public. Still editable. One tab was labeled exclusions, and there, next to my name in red font, someone had typed, "Too quiet, not wedding material. Doesn't match vibe." A second note read, "Possible wildcard. Suggest keeping outside main tent." I must have stared at those words for a full minute before anything even registered. I had helped them build this wedding. I had helped them plan the timeline, set the spreadsheets, make the guest charts. I had literally helped them organize the budget, and still, they decided I was a liability to the aesthetic. I closed the sheet, leaned back in my chair, and felt something hardening in my chest, something permanent. The next morning, Jenna tagged me on Facebook in a post that featured a long table at their engagement brunch. She, Trevor, her parents, my parents, and most of the bridal party sat smiling in golden hour light. Her caption read, "Surrounded by those who matter most." Our forever team. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. Not even a nod. One of her cousins commented, "Didn't Trevor have an older brother?" And Jenna replied, "You're not imagining. Let's just say not everyone knows how to support people quietly." 19 likes. I didn't comment. I didn't argue. But something broke. That night, I opened my old laptop, the one I'd helped Trevor fix 2 years ago. He'd never revoked my remote access. Within 15 minutes, I was inside his drive. There was a folder called Plan C Backup Layouts. Inside it, I found a chart labeled Contingency Seating. My name was next to the lawn area with the note, "No tent access. Provide paper plate." No explanation. Just that. And then I found a group chat called Wedding Vibe Team. Messages between Jenna, Trevor, and 3 of her college friends. One said, "He's sweet but off-brand. Like, Target ad energy." Another replied, "I mean, he paid for half the cake. Should we at least let him be in one photo?" Then Jenna, "No. He's like the weird uncle who cries in airport terminals. Messes with the aesthetic." My favorite came last. "Anyway, what's he gonna do? Venmo us into submission?" They laughed. I didn't. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't send an angry message. I made a list. First, pull all pending transfers. Then download every invoice. Freeze the Venmo pool. Screenshot the chats. Back up every document. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the truth, something they never expected me to claim. By the time I stood outside that tent with a paper plate, I had already decided how this story would end. I had already decided I wasn't staying for the toast. When Trevor turned away to take a phone call, I stepped back toward the gift box near the tent entrance. My envelope was still there, wedged between 2 others. I took it back. Inside was a check I'd written for $500. I ripped it in half, then in quarters, then into confetti. A bridesmaid behind me gasped. I looked Trevor in the eye as I dropped the pieces into the trash and said, "Financial ghosts don't bring gifts." Then I walked away, barefoot, through the grass. That night, I opened the shared balance. $4,700 in pending wedding costs were still under my account. I canceled every dollar. Then I blocked every linked contact. The next morning, I woke up to 32 voicemails, 100 messages, and a call from a number I hadn't seen in almost a decade. That's when I knew this wasn't just about a wedding. It never had been. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I did was check my phone. There were 43 missed calls, most of them from my mom and a few from Jenna's number. My father had left a single voicemail around midnight, and even without listening to it, I knew exactly what kind of voice it would be. Cold, detached, righteous. I didn't press play. Instead, I opened my laptop and went back into the wedding documents folder I'd copied from Trevor's drive. I needed to understand the whole scope. I needed to see just how far this had gone. Because by now, it was obvious I hadn't just been excluded by accident. This was never thoughtlessness. This was design. The folder was filled with backups, labeled by date, some going back almost 9 months. I started with the earliest versions and worked forward. Guest lists, budget breakdowns, food orders, table maps, vendor receipts, even backup invitations. Everything Jenna had ever planned. Every email she'd sent to vendors, every tweak to the color scheme or DJ playlist, it was all archived. I found a file called Tint Optics, and inside was a diagram of the venue layout. There, at the far edge of the property near the lot, was a circle labeled Overflow Picnic Seating. The note beside it read, "For non-core guests who still contribute financially. Keep present but out of frame." I didn't even get a name. I was a label. Scrolling deeper, I found the email chain between Jenna and the event planner, a woman named Kayla who probably regretted signing that contract now. One of Jenna's messages stood out immediately. "We want to make sure that Trevor's brother is still accommodated without compromising the theme. Ideally, he's not visible in the formal photography or seated where lighting and floral installations are concentrated." Kayla responded politely, asking if this person had dietary restrictions or mobility needs. Jenna just replied, "No, he's just not the right look." I couldn't believe how deliberate it all was. This wasn't some passive oversight or a simple mistake. This was character assassination dressed up as elegance. I was the wrong aesthetic. I was the quiet kid, the wrong expression, The guy with no plus one and too much debt to be interesting at brunch. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't feel like fighting. I just sat there, rereading the emails, breathing slower with every scroll. Eventually, I found a message where my name was finally used. Trevor said, "He'll be fine. Nate doesn't make noise. He just pays and disappears." That line stayed with me all day. Later, I opened my browser and went to Facebook. Jenna had posted a new photo album titled The Vibe We Built, featuring engagement party highlights and captions about found family and those who showed up when it mattered. The comments were nauseating. People I barely remembered from our childhood were gushing about how beautiful it all looked. Then I saw a post from my aunt, so proud of the happy couple, wishing them a flawless day full of love. Attached was a photo of my parents standing between Jenna's parents, wine glasses raised in a toast. The caption from Jenna was worse. "When your true family shows up, you never feel alone." I wasn't tagged. I wasn't even mentioned. But I saw myself reflected in their smiles, in the way they could pose so perfectly for a camera while cutting someone out of the frame. That night, I rechecked Venmo. The shared wedding fund still existed. It still showed my name as one of the trusted contributors. I had access, which meant I had control. The balance read $4,700, frozen, untouched since I pulled authorization. I stared at it, wondering if I should just drain it and leave a memo that read, "Payment declined. Love, your aesthetic failure." But no, I had a better idea. The next day, I met with a lawyer named Daniel, someone recommended by a friend in passing years ago. He didn't smile when I explained what was happening. He didn't interrupt or look surprised. He just nodded slowly and said, "We're going to need documentation. All of it. Every receipt, every message, every financial tie." I spent the entire afternoon printing emails, exporting chat transcripts, downloading spreadsheets, and transferring screenshots. Every time I thought I was finished, I remembered one more layer. I remembered how Jenna had sent me a PayPal invoice for a wedding gift contribution for months ago, and I just clicked pay without hesitation. I found it. $250 for a champagne saber she saw on TikTok. She never even said thank you. I brought everything to Daniel. He flipped through it with the expression of someone reading a horror novel that wasn't fiction. "They used your name on a line of credit," he said finally, pointing to a signature on a scanned bank form. "Did you approve this?" I didn't recognize the document. It was an application for a short-term venue loan, listing my full name as a guarantor. The signature was clean, accurate, but I'd never seen that paper before. My mouth went dry. "No," I whispered. "I never signed that." Daniel leaned back, folding his hands. "Then your father committed fraud." My head spun. Of course it was my father. He had access to everything, my old documents, my social security number, even my bank account when I was younger. I remembered the drawer in my childhood bedroom where I used to keep a manila envelope labeled important stuff. He used to joke about how sloppy I was for leaving things unlocked. I guess he wasn't joking. We filed a report the next morning. I didn't tell anyone. Not Trevor, not my parents, not Jenna. I went completely silent. Let them wonder. Let them scramble to cover up the cracks. I knew what I had to do. I had to make sure they couldn't hide it anymore. I had to stop giving them space to turn me invisible again. 3 days before the wedding, I went to the venue myself. Dressed casual. No announcement. Just a walk through the place I'd helped finance. The floral arches were already standing. The dance floor was installed. I watched 2 vendors arguing about linen shades and smiled when I recognized the table runners I'd contributed to from Jenna's email list titled Nate's Miscellaneous Costs. I asked one of the assistants who was handling logistics. She gave me Kayla's name. I asked to speak with her. She arrived with a clipboard and a Bluetooth headset, looking exhausted but sharp. I handed her a folder with all the documents, the ones proving that my accounts were attached to the catering, the music, the decor. She flipped through them quickly. "What is this?" she asked. I said, "I'm withdrawing all authorization. Everything tied to my name is off limits as of now." She said, "You can't just—" I cut her off. "I already did." Then I left. The night before the wedding, I stayed awake replaying the same thought. They planned this. All of it. And they expected me to keep showing up like a loyal background extra. But they forgot one thing. Even extras get tired of being erased. Even quiet people take up space eventually. The morning of the wedding arrived like a dare. I got up at dawn, showered in silence, and dressed with the precision of someone heading into a war disguised as a celebration. The venue was a 2-hour drive into the desert, some glass and limestone estate that looked like a winery but wasn't. I arrived at 10:37 a.m., early enough that most of the guests were still pulling into the gravel lot, too distracted to ask questions. I parked, stepped out in a fitted black suit, and pulled 3 white boxes from the trunk, each wrapped in silver ribbon, each labeled with names that had once meant something. One for Trevor, one for my parents, one for the gift table, where people pretended their offerings were symbols of love, not currency for approval. Vendors buzzed like bees across the property, taping wires to posts, unloading equipment, wheeling carts of chafing dishes through gravel. The tent, pure white, curved like a cathedral, towered over the field like a monument to performative unity. I spotted Kayla near the back entrance, barking into her headset. I walked directly toward her, ignoring the looks from 3 groomsmen adjusting their suspenders nearby. When she saw me, her face tightened into that expression professionals wear when something goes wrong but they still have to stay on script. "We already handled your request," she said before I could speak. I shook my head. "There's more." I handed her an envelope filled with updated documentation, formal notice that the contracts tied to my accounts were to be suspended. Not questioned. Not negotiated. Suspended, effective immediately. She scanned the papers without saying a word. Then her eyes met mine, and in that moment, something shifted. Not anger, not confusion, just recognition. She nodded once, called for 2 assistants, and walked off without another word. 15 minutes later, the music cut out mid-sound check. The DJ stood behind his table blinking at his silent laptop. A technician unplugged half the lighting system. The oven in the catering truck stopped humming. One of the florists stopped wiring eucalyptus garlands to a chair rail and started removing them. Nobody knew why at first, but the panic spread fast. I walked past the catering van just as the 3-tiered cake was being carefully reloaded into its box. Jenna's cousin stood nearby clutching a clipboard and a mimosa, looking around like she'd stepped into a parallel universe. I found Trevor near the fountain behind the tent, pacing with a phone pressed to his ear, sweating through his tux jacket like someone finally realizing the fantasy was crumbling. When he saw me, his face twisted into something between rage and desperation. "What did you do?" he hissed, storming toward me like he thought intimidation would still work. I kept my tone calm. "I secured my assets," I said, handing him the first box. "That's yours. Open it at the altar." He stared at the ribbon like it might explode. He tried to grab my arm. "You sabotaged this entire wedding. You think this makes you noble?" I didn't flinch. I didn't sabotage anything. I just stopped paying for a show I was never invited to join. He opened his mouth again, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked into the tent, into the space I wasn't allowed to enter 2 days ago, and set the other 2 boxes at the head table. One in front of my parents' reserved seats, one next to the overpriced floral centerpiece they made me help finance. By now, people had noticed. Guests looked confused. Jenna's bridesmaids whispered in a circle near the champagne buckets. A toddler started crying in the distance, no music to drown it out. Then I raised my voice just enough for the nearest cluster of people to hear. Since I wasn't invited to the celebration, I figured I'd bring something else, closure. That's when Daniel stepped forward. He wasn't dressed like a lawyer, not today, just dark slacks, no tie, sunglasses still on. He held a briefcase in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. I nodded, and he opened the folder. "Effective as of 9 a.m. this morning," Daniel began, loud enough to carry but steady. "All financial and legal connections between Nathan and the following individuals are nullified: Trevor, Jenna, Vivian, and Raymond." My parents' names. He continued without a pause. "Power of attorney revoked. Co-signatures terminated. Access to any joint assets, past or present, frozen. Furthermore, a formal report of identity misuse has been submitted and confirmed by First Central Bank, related to a loan application signed fraudulently in the name of Nathan on April 14, 2021. Gasps rippled across the tent. Jenna's aunt dropped her champagne flute. My father, who had arrived 5 minutes prior and taken his place at the front, lunged forward like a man with something left to hide. "You smug little bastard," he spat. I pulled out my phone, opened the video, and played it on speaker for all to hear. Grainy footage filled the screen. A security camera in a bank lobby. My father at the counter, folder in hand, sliding over papers to a clerk. A document showing my name, my social security number, and my birth date. Stolen. Used. Without my knowledge. The clerk stamped it and smiled. Silence fell like a hammer. Jenna's face drained to ash. Trevor stared at the phone like he didn't recognize the man on screen. But I did. I had known that man my entire life. My mother whispered, "You don't know what you're doing." I looked her straight in the eye. "No, you didn't know who you were stealing from." I turned back to Trevor. "You didn't invite me to your wedding," I said. "But you did invite my money, my labor, and my silence. Consider this my RSVP." One of the texts accidentally reconnected power. For 2 seconds, music blared, then cut again. I stepped out of the tent as people began to move, murmur, panic. From my pocket, I played one final voicemail on speaker, just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. My father's voice, brittle and low. "You've made your choice. We'll do things without you. Just don't expect to show up later." I held the phone up like a confession. "I'm just following instructions." And then I left. No music, no cake, no photos. Just a dead celebration stitched together with lies. 5 days after the wedding collapsed in that tent of borrowed light and empty intention, I received a certified envelope from the Federal Credit Authority. It was the kind of envelope you only recognize if you've ever had a brush with bureaucratic violence. Thick paper, government seal, window cut for your name. Inside was the final confirmation I had been waiting on for months. The fraud case tied to my name had been investigated and escalated. My identity had been cleared. The loan was invalidated under criminal conditions. The debt was no longer mine. My father's signature had officially cost him his freedom with finance, and the weight he tried to bolt onto my back had snapped off and pinned him in place. It was over, on paper, at least, but the aftermath didn't care about paperwork. The fallout arrived like a chain of controlled demolitions, one family structure collapsing after another. My father's consulting license was revoked the same day the investigation results went public. His personal accounts were frozen by 2 regional banks. One of them posted a fraud alert internally that blacklisted our shared last name indefinitely. He couldn't move money. He couldn't access the credit line he'd relied on for years. I heard from a former colleague of his, someone who messaged me anonymously, that his firm quietly terminated their contract with him, citing moral cause and breach of fiduciary ethics. And still, the stories kept unraveling. It wasn't just him. A week after the judgment, a private number called 3 times in a row. I didn't answer, but the 4th call left a voicemail. It was his voice, but thinner now, fraying at the edges with desperation. "It wasn't just me," he said, breathing too hard. "Your mother helped. She knew about the documents. She was the one who brought them home from the drawer. She was the one who said you'd never notice." I didn't respond, not because I didn't believe him, but because I already knew. That same day, I received a padded envelope with no return address and a flash drive inside. Taped to it was a short letter in blocky cursive I instantly recognized. My Uncle Peter, my father's estranged younger brother, who hadn't been at a family event in nearly 8 years. "I saw what you did," the note said. "And I want you to know, this wasn't the first time. They've done this before. They planned it. Long before this wedding. You were just the latest piece on their board." The flash drive contained 2 files, an audio recording dated 4 years earlier, and a scanned photograph I'd never seen. The recording started low and muffled, clearly a phone call recorded without consent. My father's voice came first, half laughing. "He's good for money. We keep him around. He won't question it." Then my mother's voice followed, soft and smug in equal measure. "He always comes back. He's wired that way. He doesn't know how not to be useful." I listened to that file 3 times before closing my laptop and staring at nothing for a long, blank stretch. Not because I was shocked, but because it all made sense now, and there was something horrifying about that clarity. Meanwhile, the wedding that was never really a wedding continued to decay in slow motion. Jenna left Trevor within 2 weeks. I only knew because Emma, the one cousin who still spoke to me, sent me a screenshot of Jenna's final Instagram story before she deleted her account. A single photo of her engagement ring placed on a windowsill, captioned, "Turns out the diamond was fake." Like the family. Nothing else. No explanation. No apology. Just digital ashes from a fire she helped start. Trevor tried to recover whatever dignity he thought he had left. He started posting gym selfies and fake deep quotes about betrayal, redemption, rising stronger. None of it stuck. The venue filed a breach of contract lawsuit against him. 2 vendors pressed criminal charges for bounced payments. His reputation, what little of it existed outside of Jenna's Instagram feed, evaporated in days. Last I heard, he was renting a basement studio above a vape shop in a strip mall west of the city, still trying to fundraise through half-hearted crowdfunding pages where nobody donated more than $5. And then there was my mother. She sent a letter. No apology, no ownership. Just a single-page statement typed in Times New Roman. "We didn't know your father was capable of such a betrayal. We never intended to cause harm. Please remember that, no matter what, we are still your family." I read it once and then filed it under a folder I'd recently renamed Delusions from the Past. I didn't respond. I wouldn't be responding again. Instead, I took everything I had, every receipt, every screenshot, every message, every recorded call, and every edited-out conversation, and I made a video. No drama, no heavy music, just a single camera angle in my apartment. I wore a plain black t-shirt. I didn't raise my voice. I simply held up the proof and told the story as it happened. I narrated the theft, the exclusion, the erasure, and finally, the reclamation. I ended it by holding up the ripped check from the gift table and said, "They used my name. They spent my money. They erased my face. So I took all of it back." That video hit 3.4 million views in the first 10 days. Messages poured in. Hundreds, then thousands. Comments from people who'd gone through the same thing, financial ghosts walking around in well-dressed families. My mom took a credit card out in my name when I was 16. My uncle used my info to buy a truck. I didn't know until my taxes bounced. I didn't go to my brother's wedding because I wasn't on brand either. A lawyer in Portland offered to volunteer time. A journalist in Baltimore asked to cover the story. A nonprofit reached out with interest in collaboration. A woman in Alaska sent me a handmade keychain that read, "You are not your debt." So I built something. A digital platform. A space. A movement. I called it No More Chairs, a nod to the folding one they wanted me to sit in outside the tent. It became a forum for people who were used like furniture by their families. Walking wallets. Silent labor. Backup plans. We launched with a Discord server, a mobile site, a private archive of resources. Within 1 month, we had over 12,000 members and 6 volunteer lawyers offering free consultations to victims of family-based financial abuse. The first post I wrote on the homepage read, "You are not ungrateful for saying no. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not the villain for walking away." One night, I was closing up the small co-working office I'd started renting downtown for the project. My phone buzzed with a message from my aunt. "Your father collapsed. His heart. He's asking for you." I let the phone go dark. When I got home, I poured a drink and opened the second file from the flash drive. It was a photo of me at 12, holding a certificate for something I'd forgotten. My father stood beside me, one hand on my shoulder, smiling too wide. The handwriting on the back, and my mother's soft lips, read, "Even then, he didn't know we were just using him." I dropped it into the fireplace and watched the edges black and curl, vanish. Then I opened my laptop, typed out a final post, and hit publish. My family taught me 2 things. 1. Blood is leverage. 2. Silence is loyalty. I don't owe them either anymore. 6 months passed like a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. I didn't announce my departure, didn't pin a dramatic farewell post or stage some symbolic moment of closure. I just left, packed up my apartment in silence, rented a small place in a quiet town 3 states away, and built a life no one could trace unless I wanted them to. I changed my number, deleted old accounts, and stopped checking the social media pages my family used to monitor me like a stock they were too cheap to invest in. My name faded from their photos, their captions, their curated narratives. For the first time, my absence wasn't accidental, it was intentional, chosen, irreversible. The first few weeks were quieter than I'd ever experienced, almost haunting in their simplicity. No one asked me for money. No one invited me to a party where I was only welcome in theory. No one messaged to just check in with passive accusations baked beneath their concern. I spent mornings walking downtown streets with coffee in hand, nodding at strangers who didn't care where I came from. I spent afternoons working on the platform I'd built. No more chairs, helping people I'd never met who somehow already knew me better than my own parents ever had. It was simple work, quiet work, honest work. No one asked for blood. No one asked for silence. Around month 4, the messages started again, filtered through old contacts or masked numbers. 1 from my aunt, 3 from unknown sources. A single voicemail from my mother that started with a sob and ended with a warning. "You can't just erase family," she said. "You can't pretend like you were never part of this." But that was the thing. They had erased me long before I erased them. They had practiced the performance of family so well, they'd forgotten I ever existed outside of my usefulness. I didn't respond. Not out of anger. Just out of peace. I didn't need their chaos anymore to feel real. One Tuesday afternoon, I walked past a bakery downtown and saw a perfect 3-tiered cake in the display window. White frosting, soft piping, nothing extravagant, just clean and symmetrical. For a moment, I stood frozen, staring through the glass, not because I wanted it, but because I finally saw what they had tried to make me into. Decorative, present, predictable, not loved, just symmetrical. Last week, I sat in a booth at a quiet cafe I now visited every Friday. Same coffee, same book, same empty table across from me. My phone buzzed once. Then again. I flipped it over. 32 missed calls, 11 messages, and a handful of voicemails. All from numbers I no longer recognized, but somehow still expected. I didn't open any of them. I didn't feel the spike in my chest I used to. I didn't shake. I just exhaled slowly, set the phone face down again, and returned to my coffee. Once, I would have believed I owed them an explanation. Once, I would have folded under the weight of their disappointment. But not anymore. That's what they never understood. Silence isn't surrender. It's power. It's presence. It's the sound of finally refusing to be summoned. They don't know where I live. They don't know who I spend my time with. They don't know that the person they spent years trying to edit, mold, and stage for their convenience simply stopped existing. I didn't burn bridges. I took the whole shoreline with me. Before I left that cafe, I scribbled something in the back of my book. Just a line. Just for me. They used to own my reactions. Now they don't even get my silence.